Takuma is a ruthless loser who is uglier than all your exes combined. Everything changed when he got isekai'd into his game as a demon lord and clapped everything in a skirt. This story starts in a dark room where Takuma, a king of nerds, logged into Cross Reverie, a game that summed up his entire existence. His character was Diablo, the feared demon lord who got pissed off whenever lovebirds showed up to challenge him, which reminded Takuma of his inability to get clapped. He kept punishing lovebirds until the clock struck 12, and he got summoned into a different world by the lips of two baddies. Takuma started trying to figure out how he was in Diablo's body, while the Mega Melon's elf and midget Pantherians started arguing. When he heard they were at Starfall Tower, the summoning point from the game, he realized that he was currently living every otaku's fantasy. He wanted to talk to the girls, but remembered that he had always been a friendless outcast who only spoke to people through games. He then used Diablo's voice to mask his low testosterone and commanded the girls to make up. The power from his command literally forced them to shake hands before slave collars appeared on their necks. Moments later, they had left the tower, and the girls were trying to figure out why their enslavement ritual had backfired. Takuma then realized that he was wearing Diablo's Demon King ring that deflected magic and explained it to them. They told him to follow them to the city so they could get free and finally introduce themselves. Miss Mega Melons was Shira and the midget was Rem. They were both wannabe adventurers who wanted his help in getting officially registered at the guild. They got to Faltra, the border city, and found an inn. Once inside, they met Mai, the demi-human receptionist, who almost made Takuma puke when she posed like a furry. He'd experienced another wave of fear when Shira asked to get a room with him. He tried to hide his lack of experience with a fake Sigma act, but when Rem also started trying to get a room with him, his cultured mind got scrambled. Moments later, all three of them were in a room, as trying to be independent feminists wasn't really taking the girls far. Takuma had started thinking about cultured activities for later, when a smoke show hottie showed up to see Rem. Celestine was the head of the town's mage association and had the responsibility of maintaining the barrier protecting it. She wanted to talk to Rem, but after seeing the collar on the girls, she got curious about him. They went down to the inn's pub to talk, but Takuma got distracted as Shira was showing him what she could do with a Magnum sausage. Takuma explained what happened to Celestine, and she decided to investigate ways to free the girls since he conveniently didn't know how. When he demanded an answer as to why she was looking for Rem, one of her mages named Gallic nearly made him break character. He managed to hide his lack of balls and scared Gallic off with a warning. Celestine then tried to get Rem to come with her, but she turned down the offer and told her she could take care of herself. After Celestine left, Takuma asked Rem why she was on the radar of such a powerful person, but she refused to answer. Sensing an important storyline due to his gamer experience, he tossed her fun-sized rice cakes across his shoulder and left to interrogate her while Shira decided to hang back and kept stuffing her face. Once in the room, he wasted no time pinning her down for questioning. When she asked him what he wanted to do, he couldn't find a body part that he could so he decided to start with her ear. So as he messed with it while demanding answers, she started making happy noises. When he blew on it, she went to cream paradise while he reminisced about what it felt like to play with his cat. By the time he realized what was happening, she had already gone past the point of return and asked if he would stick with her after learning her secret. He then promised to stay with her and sealed the deal with a that made her inner walls flood with happy juices. After, she told him she was housing the soul of Krebskull, the demon lord that he remembered as the strongest official boss in the game. This was why Celestine was offering her protection, as the only way the demon lord could escape was through her death. When he promised to help her get free of the demon lord's soul, she started crying and told him that no one had ever decided to stick around after hearing her truth. Later that night, he was outside thinking when Gallic showed up with a bunch of other mages and started trash-talking him. When he talked back after Gallic tossed a bottle of sake at him, Gallic summoned a level 30 fire-breathing salamander and ordered the beast to turn Takuma into grilled chicken. When he walked out of the flames without a scratch, Gallic made the beast hit him with another blast, but he treated it like a warm breeze and told Gallic that he was at level 150 while pulling out a staff. He then used the staff to blow up the salamander and went over to Gallic, who was pissing himself, to give him a strong warning. The next day, Takuma woke up, glad that his new fantasy life wasn't just a long dream, and suddenly felt a weird sensation. His left hand had gone rogue and refused to obey his commands to get off Shira's melon. He tried to get help from his right hand, but was also struggling. Unable to control his own limbs, he decided to let nature run its course until Shira woke up. She pulled her melon away and told him he could have whatever part of her plot he wanted if he made her his master. Rem also woke up and turned bright red when she saw his hand on. He managed to salvage the situation by getting into character. Later on, while walking through town with the girls, Takuma noticed that there were very few humans around. Shira explained that humans didn't really like being around naturally superior life forms, which made sense when he remembered Gallic's attempt to play Sigma the previous night. He then asked about how levels were assessed, and Rem, who was a level 40 summoner, told him that they would check it out at the guild. Shira, who didn't know her level as she was still unregistered, claimed she was probably higher than Rem by showing off her gravity-defying melons. At the guild, Takuma forgot how to read, so he made Shira fill the form out for him. The demi-human receptionist with monstrous melons then told him to make a blood seal and got splattered after he tore an artery in his thumb. She then showed them the magic measuring mirror, and after Shira filled it with her magic, her level turned out to be 30. Takuma was up next, but immediately he touched the mirror. A dark wave spread across town, causing an earthquake that terrified the girls. After he left, the mirror and things went back to normal. An ugly midget with bunny ears showed up. She was Sylvie, the guild master, who immediately asked them to come with her after introducing herself. In her office, Sylvie explained that Takuma's magic could not be measured, which meant that they wouldn't know what kind of quest to give him even if he went through with the registration. Takuma then told her that he was too broke to have standards, so she decided to accept him as an adventurer under the guild. After, she gave them their first quest from the Mages Association, which was to defeat a Medora snake in the man-eating woods. On the way there, Takuma wanted to use a teleportation spell to close the distance, but they told him that kind of magic didn't exist, which made him realize that their world wasn't exactly like the game. When they finally got to the woods, which looked like something out of the Conjuring multiverse later that day, Shira sensed some people watching them. After she pointed out their location in the trees, Takuma used elemental magic to burn them out. The stalkers were elves, led by Celsior, a commander who told Shira he was there to save her from Takuma. Shira happened to be the princess of the Elven Kingdom, and they all thought she had been kidnapped by Takuma, so they demanded her release with arrows drawn. Shira told Celsior that she didn't want to go back to the kingdom, where she was going to be forced to become her brother's sausage handler. After Shira refused to go back with them, Rem felt her aura increasing and promised to help her fight them. Takuma then told the elves to show him what they were made of, so they shot at him with their arrows, but they bounced off his chest like twigs. While the girls started creaming from his alpha aura, he told the elves that they were a bunch of costumed clowns who wouldn't last a minute against him. Pissed off, Celsior whipped out a Tempest arrow and told him to meet his little friend. After the arrow's blast nearly blinded them, Takuma brushed the debris off his vibranium abs. He then pulled out his staff and used another elemental magic to freeze the entire forest in an instant. Feeling the instant frostbite, Gallic came out of hiding and roasted the elves for being incompetent weaklings that liked to clap their sisters. Knowing he was the one behind the suspicious quest, Takuma gave him a final warning, and Rem promised to tell on him to Celestine. Shira then told Celsior to tell her brother that she wasn't interested in becoming his clap toy, as she had a better life being broke with Takuma and Rem. Later that night, Rem had gone to talk to Celestine, and Takuma was left struggling to talk to Shira, as he never studied Riz during his life as a shut-in geek. When he eventually started talking about his promise to Rem, Shira got jealous and left him unable to move as she threw her monstrous melons on his chest. Seizing the opportunity to finally live out his greatest fantasy, he grabbed onto them and started talking about how he was an alpha male who could use any of them as he pleased. His alpha talk started to work on Shira and left him in shock when he noticed something hard on the tip of the melons. After he squeezed them and made her spill some of her juice on his cultured brain started to leak. He was about to take things a step further when he sensed bloodlust and turned to see Rem, who probably knew she could never have melons big enough to get him that excited. A couple of days later, Sylvie called the gang to her office for another quest specifically put out for Takuma. When she told them it was directly from Celestine, Takuma figured it was probably a form of apology for what happened. But Rem didn't want to accept it. She thought the unusually high pay tagged to it was a handout from Celestine, so she refused to take it. But Shira immediately reminded her that she was too broke to be proud. Seeing that she really didn't want to go, Takuma told Rem to hang back so he and Shira could handle it instead. They were on their way out of the guild when a knight that somehow managed to make Blue Eyes cringe stopped him. Emil had heard rumors of a certain demon dragging two hotties around town with slave collars, and from the looks of things he wasn't wrong. The girls told Takuma that Emil was the strongest warrior in the Adventurers Guild, and he wasted no time in approving their claims by telling Takuma that he was at level 50 before whipping out his sword to challenge him. Happy to finally see something similar to the game, Takuma put on the Sigmund act and roasted Emil's dollar store Disney Prince look. Emil went off the rails, telling Takuma that he was a pro-feminist and refused to listen when the girls tried to explain things. Once he took his stance, Takuma geeked out, remembering the move from his gamer days, and blocked it with his staff when Emil tried to use it. Seeing Takuma was no ordinary demon, Emil pulled back to activate another deadly move that took a while to activate. Takuma knocked him out in the middle of the charge-up. After regaining consciousness, Emil got back up, refusing to admit defeat, and was about to get his perfect smile destroyed when the girls told him to stop. They explained that they had become slaves due to their own incompetence and told him to mind his business. Takuma had started to feel bad for him when he hit them with the cringiest smile known to man and walked away, hiding his embarrassment while telling Takuma to holla if he even needed help. Moments later, Shira and Takuma were on their quest to deliver drinks to the Bridge of Ulug. After seeing a river, Shira swung her melons to get Takuma to agree to go skinny dipping, but he didn't want her to see his mini sausage and disagreed. At the bridge moments later, they got surrounded by knights who thought he was a fallen. Luckily, Boris had heard of his clapping escapades with the girls and recognized him. After Shira gave them the drinks, Boris told them that an army of over 100 fallen was currently en route to the bridge, hence the mass hysteria and evacuation. When Shira asked Takuma for the next move, he figured that the army of fallen was probably trying to get to Rem, so he wanted to head back. Just then, Boris handed them a thank you note for the wine, and when Takuma asked him why, he said something about trying to face his final battle like a Jaga Chad. Takuma told him to work on his Sigmund act and walked in to fight for them. Moments later, the fallen army showed up, led by some thrift store version of Wonder Woman. Seeing the larger-than-life beasts, Takuma told them to head back inside, and when Boris tried to question him, Shira told him to shut his bit up. After they left, Takuma walked up to the fallen army and gave them a chance to leave. A mutated boar as big as your obese uncle then stood over him and immediately got blasted half a mile away. Meanwhile, back in the city, Rem got back to the inn where Celestine was waiting to tell her that she had fired Gallic. She had also heard that Takuma was a self-proclaimed demon lord and wanted to be sure that Rem wasn't just being blinded by his riz and chiseled abs. Rem was trying to cover up how down bad she was for Takuma when Gallic showed up with blood on his hands, asking for a second chance. He told Celestine that he had taken out most of the mages out of anger and refused to listen when she told him to pipe down. He then pulled out a demon blade that could see, and Rem immediately sent a summoning to stop him. After putting the blade in his chest, a fallen named Gregor burst out of him, happy to not have to listen to his insecure whining anymore. Back at the bridge, Takuma had taken out most of the fallen army, so Edelgard, the dwarf elf commanding them, got off her pet and went to take him on personally. While Takuma fought off Edelgard, Gregor was glad to have finally found his target. Celestine's barrier was the only thing stopping their invasion, and with Gallic's stupidity helping him sneak in, all he had to do was take her out. Hearing this, the mages told Rem to take Celestine to safety, and as they both ran out of the inn, Gregor used the mages' heads to break down the walls before chasing after them. Rem's adrenaline rush caused them to take a wrong turn, which left them cornered as Gregor caught up to them. Rem then summoned a three-horned Indian bull that rammed into Gregor and had its jawbone snapped by a nasty uppercut. The next moment, Emil, the Knight of Cringetopia, dropped in and asked Gregor if he preferred rice cakes or melons. Before Gregor could answer, he was surrounded by other adventurers ready to risk it all to protect Celestine. Emil tried to draw first blood, and while Gregor protected himself with his fists, he told the knight to try losing the excess gold, as it was so last season. To make him stop the pointless striking, Gregor released a magic energy blast and told Emil that his face was making him want to puke. Emil then tried to use his special move on him, but it was easily blocked before Gregor used magic bullets to put him down. The girls told him to quit trying to play Sigma, but he refused and told them they were safe with him as he charged up for another beatdown. At the bridge, the entire fallen army and knights watched like UFC fans, while Takuma and Edelgard clashed swords at the speed of sound. Seeing that she couldn't land a hit even with all that speed, Edelgard charged up for her most powerful move, and Takuma flexed his vibranium abs, ready to take it. The shockwave from the strike nearly knocked Shira off the bridge. When she pulled back to see how damaged he was, he casually stood back up and popped his shoulder back in place. He then told her to stick to making dinner for her man, but started to get worried when he noticed that she wasn't backing down despite clearly being outmatched. Just then, Shira told him about what was happening with Celestine and Rem after hearing from a messenger. Realizing that this was Edelgard's plan all along, he told Shira and the knights to take cover before giving Edelgard one final warning to retreat. Seeing that she was adamant about getting smoked, he released a small white orb that slowly fell to the ground. Once it hit, the entire area lit up, taking out Edelgard and her entire army. The light faded, revealing a large crater that was a bridge moments ago. After seeing that she had somehow survived the blast, Takuma turned to leave with Shira and managed to successfully pull off the teleportation skill. By the time they got to Rem's location, Amel was looking like a homeless boxer, while Rem was losing the little blood she had from her head. Shira went to check on her, and Takuma gave Celestine a healing potion before giving Emil permission to take a break from being Gregor's sandbag. Gregor refused to believe him when he said he had defeated Edelgard and tried to use the magic bullets, but they were instantly reflected back by Takuma's Demon Lord ring. Gregor was trying to figure out how he could reflect magic. Gregor tried to use a gravity amplifying skill on him. Like before, Takuma made his own version of the same skill and left the mutated bush lizard begging for his life as he was crushed into the ground by his rapidly increasing weight. Takuma decided to put him in a dimension of darkness he casually had lying around and sealed him for eternity. With Gregor defeated, the girls ran over to thank him for saving them, but he once again had no idea what to say in the situation, so he claimed he had simply done it so they could keep suffocating him with their melons. When they gladly accepted to be his clapping slaves, Shira told him to take a quick sniff of her melons, but they were too bouncy for his head to sit on them, and caused him to bounce into Rem's chest of steel, which immediately knocked him out. Days after the fallen attack, those who lost their lives were buried, and the locals slowly found a way to get back to their normal lives. 10 days later, Takuma was about to start another 12-hour nap when Shira pounced on him and almost made his dopamine receptors implode when he saw her melons in their full royal glory. She had started to get him bricked when Rem showed up and dropkicked her. She then used her melons to swallow his arms again, and Rem tried to do the same, but her ribs were the only things grinding up his elbow. The next moment, Sylvie showed up with a new quest. The lord of the city had received a threat from the Elven Kingdom demanding that Shira be returned to them or there would be a war. The quest was for Diablo to find a way to stop the war from happening since he technically owned her. Hearing that she was now likely going to cause a war because of her dreams of independence, Shira pressed her melons into Takuma's arm to remind him that she was worth fighting for. Takuma started having a panic attack after realizing that he was suddenly being made to stop a war. To make matters worse, Sylvie told him that Prince Kira had put a bounty on Shira's head to get random adventurers interested in capturing her. Hearing that the elf prince had gone as far as putting a bounty on his sister's head, Takuma got pissed. His harem dreams, which had just kicked off, were being threatened, and he wasn't going to stand for it. To thank him for choosing to fight for her, Shira put him in a leg lock and suffocated him with her melons. On the way to see the lord in charge of the city, Sylvie told them that he had once taken down an army of fallen and had anger management issues. When they got to Galford's palace, the girls introduced themselves and prayed Takuma would be able to do the same without threatening to scorch the earth. After a couple of seconds of deep internal conflict, he managed to speak like a normal person, but he couldn't keep his act together for long and threatened to deep-fry Galford's sausage. But thankfully, Galford was into extreme culture practices. With introductions done, he stood on business and explained the obvious, which was that Shira should just go back to her Alabamian kingdom, but Takuma rejected the idea. So Galford asked Shira why she preferred being a broke slave. After she justified her insanity with the excuse of having an adventurous soul, he spoke to Takuma to confirm his stance and entrusted the anti-war mission to him. He then introduced them to Alicia, a female imperial knight sent from the royal capital to oversee the group. Takuma was shocked to see a female imperial knight, as they were typically men. He became even more skeptical when he saw how quickly she became friends with the girls. He feared that she would be able to see through his demon lord tirade. Before heading to the Elven Kingdom, He took them to a weaponsmith to get a weapon considerably weaker than his staff, as he needed something that didn't obliterate anything he touched. After getting it, they were about to leave when a smoke bomb went off, and a bunch of dwarves kidnapped Shira for the bounty. As he chased after them, 2 others tried to block him and became instant graffiti. While Alicia and Rem took care of the rest, he pursued the dwarves carrying Shira through an alley. When he made it out of the alley, Shira's fish cakes landed on his face, as the dwarves had been caught by Emil, the creepy pro-feminist who once again knew exactly where they were, and Emil left to pound feminist energy into their tiny heads. Takuma, who had become worried about Shira after almost losing her, told her to remain by his side, and Rem, of course, joined in as well. Alicia had started to piss him off with her try-hard attitude, so he told her to ease up and enjoy being a useless tag-along. They then went to get head food, as her desperate hunger for attention had drained her. The next day at the inn's pub, Celestine showed up to tell them about a lead she had gotten that could help with their slave collars. Alicia reminded them that there was an Alabamian prince somewhere in the woods scheming to clap his sister, and decided to head to the slave trader's shop where Celestine said they could get help. Before entering the slave shop, Takuma prepared his mind to withstand any cultured activities he might see, but it turned out he didn't need to, as they instead saw the most elegant display of slavery known to man. The shop owner showed up in strings that barely held her large aged melons in place. After taking a look at Diablo, she saw the flow of his magic and asked if he could spare some for her. Shira could apparently also see magic flow. She then took them into her office, where she asked Rem for her baby's gender. She sensed immense power coming from her womb and assumed that Krebsholm's soul within her was a demon baby. Takuma ordered the lady to spill the tea on the collars. She then asked everyone to leave except Takuma and Shira. Rem, who almost got exposed, sat outside, and Alicia told her of a childhood spell she had learned for hiding secrets. After Rem closed her eyes to the spell, Alicia used a different spell to reveal the binding magic across Rem's body that sealed Krebsholm's soul. Meanwhile, back in the tent, the lady had put Shira in the tiniest special garment she could find and told Takuma to trace the flow of her magic. After finding an entry point on her melon, he used it to trace the flow, making Shira lose control of her senses as he squeezed and twisted her to follow the endless train of her magic. He then placed a hand on her belly button and proceeded to fill her up with his magic as the lady commanded. Rem and Alicia, who could hear her screams from outside the tent, after he had failed to remove the collar, so they went back to the inn that night where Takuma was drained from all the pouring and Shira was energized, as she was filled with his magic. After Alicia disappointed the creep by leaving to sleep in another room, she saw an elf at the door. He was Kira, the Alabamian first prince of the Elven Kingdom and Shira's brother. He came to take her back and almost got twisted like a pretzel by Takuma. He then decided to leave after apologizing to Shira for neglecting her feelings and claiming that he would be okay with whatever decision she made. Later that night, Shira couldn't sleep and was stargazing when Rem joined her. They talked about their plans for the future, and Shira claimed she wanted to start her own cafe. Rem told her that she would like to get a job in the cafe after she took care of her little world-ending demon problem. Shira then pounced on her and used the opportunity to play with her tail, which turned out to be another special spot for Rem, who then opened up as Shira stroked her tail and filled her up the same way Takuma did to her earlier, giving her a taste of the heavens. Takuma, who was awake the whole time, was having the time of his life listening to the two of them. Meanwhile, somewhere in the woods, Kira was playing the flute at midnight like a psych ward escapee and revealed his true nature and strong desire to clap his sister. In a dream, Takuma relived his early otaku years, where he actually had some gamer buddies that he would hang out with at the park. That was until he heard them calling him a freak that was only useful to them because he had good equipment. At least now, he was practically living the dream in a rundown inn with Shira's melons stuffing his face. After the morning workout, Alicia was headed to make a report to Galford, while Rem went to meet with Celestine. While waiting for Kira to return, Takuma decided to make recovery potions with Shira to prepare for any random battles ahead. He was trying to figure out how to prepare the potions when Shira's mega melons started to dangle right in front of him. After nearly losing himself in their jiggles, he realized that his hands were on autopilot. Realizing that her gravity-defying melons were the secret to his efficiency, he made her stay on all fours so he could enter beast mode. Moments later, she caught him smiling and thought he felt proud of himself, but he was simply glad to have found a new technique to increase the intensity of his cultured behavior. His smile seemed to have triggered something in her, but as she was about to tell him what it was, she heard Kira's flute, and her eyes lost their glimmer. After Takuma saw his wagon outside, he turned to talk to Shira, who just casually told him that she had decided to go back to her kingdom. He stopped her to ask why she suddenly changed her mind, so she explained getting her airways clogged by his BO wasn't good for a princess like her. After he watched her leave with Kira, Rem and Alicia showed up. He told them what happened, and when Rem asked for the next move, he told her that he was going to take a nap. He actually couldn't sleep and spent a couple of hours getting depressed as he thought about what life would be like without her megamelons. When Rem eventually came in to talk about it, she suggested that Shira was under a spell, but he already knew that. He had noticed Kira's weird flute earlier, but since he never saw it while playing the game, he didn't know how to reverse its effects. When Rem told him she was still going to try and save Shira, his fear of rejection kept him unable to move until Rem reminded him of who Shira actually was. Feeling his aura coming back, he picked up his staff and told her to get ready for the greatest rescue mission to grace the earth. On their way out, Alicia asked to come with, even if she was going to essentially become the team's Sakura. Later that evening, Shira was chained up in Kira's camp and struggled to get free. After using the spell from his flute to turn her into a puppet again, he told her to explain the kind of orders she received from Takuma. When she told him that Takuma wasn't into, he got disappointed and decided to show her how it's done. An explosion somewhere in the camp caused him to drop a vase containing slime. The creature crawled over to Shira and wrapped itself around her, melting off her clothes while Kira checked to make sure she still had the melons he had been craving for so long. He was about to use the mind control spell to finally make her his personal clap toy when Takuma tore down the entrance and freed her. Kira then went outside to see his entire camp of soldiers burning and reminded Takuma that his actions could lead to a war. When Takuma explained that he just wanted to hear Shira's thoughts again, Kira activated the spell and made her say what he wanted. Takuma then used his command over her to make her tell them how she actually felt. After she told them that she actually wanted to be Takuma's clap slave, Kira summoned the Force Hydra, a world-ending secret art exclusive to the elves. This was the second time Takuma was coming across a beast he had never seen before in the game. Already shaking in her boots, Shira told him that his aura was no match for the multi-headed guardian deity that conveniently had chainsaw teeth littered across its mouth. After asking them to stand back, he watched as Kira tried to command the beast and almost received an instant burial. Takuma hit it with an earth skill and felt confident after taking off one of its heads. When the creature regenerated and knocked him down with an elemental blast, Takuma ran out of tactics and started running to dodge the rain of attacks that followed. Shira then told him about a core in its body that was the only way it could be destroyed, but according to Kira, the core was always moving, making finding it impossible. This would have been a problem for a regular otaku, but years of gaming and depressing solitude had given Takuma enough gamer IQ to know what to do. He got under the creature's belly and used an attack that roasted the beast from the inside, destroying the core in the process. After taking out the Hydra, he was about to get rid of Shira's psychotic brother, but she stopped him, asking for his life to be spared. The Alabamian prince was making his escape when his head suddenly fell off from a slice. Galford pulled down the camouflage skill, revealing a small army that he immediately commanded to find the rest of the elven warriors. When Takuma asked what he was doing, he'd explained war to the newbie and told him to give up Shira, as she was from the enemy kingdom. Takuma naturally refused and got sealed in an energy field designed for powerhouses like him. When Alicia tried to step in, Galford easily sliced her sword in two with deadly speed. After seeing the flow of magic from the energy field, Takuma tore through it, and as Galford prepared to handle him, Alicia snuck to safety. The next moment, Takuma's explosion skill had been dodged by Galford, who was now attacking him at super speed with his sword. Using a magic mind skill, he made Sir Runzelot take a breather before he launched another attack that got him put on ice. After breaking free of the ice skill a little too early, but he still managed to use a final skill to blow Sir Runzelot to the ground. Instead of taking him out permanently, Takuma then put on the alpha male act to make it seem like Galford wasn't worth his time. With the battle over, Rem went to help Celsior and his mates, while Takuma went to console Shira. Days later, things were back to normal, including Takuma being broke and depressed since he had technically beat up his own boss, so Sylvie used the opportunity to spend some time drinking with him. What she thought would lead to a slow and memorable workout turned into a lightweight Takuma turning her into a human pillow. He then ran his fingers across her jelly bean, causing her to make happy noises until he passed out after feeling the cream. The next day, Alicia was at the imperial capital after making a report on the Galford incident to the emperor. On her way out, she ran into Sadler, a paladin who had sent an entire village to hell the previous night for worshipping the demon lord. After their catch-up, Sadler told her that he planned to visit Faltra, as a priest had mentioned the possibility of the demon lord being brought back in the city. Somewhere in the woods near Faltra, Rem was giving Shira summoning lessons to improve her skill. All she was able to summon was a mutated turkey that could share its vision with whoever summoned it. They initially thought the turkey was useless, but Takuma demonstrated that the turkey's shared vision could be used to spot enemies that were far out of the normal field of vision. Moments later, Shira caught a whiff of some nasty BO coming from Rem, so she suggested taking a bath before her nose fell off. The moment Shira's monstrous melons bounced as she took her shirt off, Takuma realized he was in trouble. After Rem also got ready to skinny dip, he told them to take care of themselves while he hid his wood behind a rock. Instead of bathing like regular people, Shira decided to clean Rem with her tongue, and she responded by trying to tear her melons out. Hearing the weird sounds they were making, Takuma was starting to go nuts until he heard a familiar voice. Edelgard was back, and after picking Rem up like a life-size doll, she told them that she knew the soul of Krebskalm was inside her. Later on, Shira gave Rem a hug, as she had just found out about her life as a container for the world-ending demon lord's soul. When Rem asked Edelgard why she hadn't attacked her yet, she skipped the part where Takuma would incinerate her, and told them that simply unaliving Rem wouldn't help revive the demon lord. She told them of a ritual that would revive the demon lord without harming Rem, and promised that the fallen would let them enjoy their harem if they did it. After Takuma told her that she had managed to get shorter, she put her spear to his neck to threaten him, and told them to bring Rem to Starfall Tower in 3 days for the ritual. On the day of the ritual, they were at a pub using cats to help build Rem's confidence when Alicia showed up and asked them to head back to the inn. On the way there, she told them about Sadler, who was now in the city and probably wasn't going to have a friendly chat with the self-proclaimed demon lord. As they came up on a corner, Sadler was right there with his boys, looking for Alicia. After he introduced himself to them, Takuma managed to instantly screw things up by telling them who he was. Alicia managed to pass it off as a joke, but Sadler wasn't laughing anymore. Rem tried to tell Sadler to mind his business, so he reminded her of her place with nothing but his aura, which left her on the ground in pain. After a second of confusion, Takuma took a closer look at Rem and saw the cheap trick Sadler claimed was a divine power from God. When he called him out for being a phony, Sadler decided to teach him a lesson, but Takuma's demon lord ring did its thing and reflected Sadler's stone curse back at him. After Sadler's minions carried him away, Alicia told Takuma that he should have clapped his ass, and Takuma started to suspect she wasn't as simple-minded as she looked. Later that evening, he went to get the girls for the ritual, but they wanted to tell Alicia about it first. After they told her, and she instantly forgot her years of training as a loyal soldier to support their plan to revive the demon lord, Takuma's suspicion sensor went off. He ended up blaming his suspicion on his inability to have a healthy relationship, so they left for the tower. At the tower that night, Edelgard had already prepared for the ritual and surprisingly wasn't bothered by seeing an Imperial Knight with them. To revive the demon lord, Takuma was going to pour a crazy amount of magic into the demon lord's soul in hopes that it would be enough to cause a revival. After Rem got on the altar, she asked Takuma to be gentle as it was her first time. He placed his hand on her belly, and once he could sense Krebskalm's soul, he poured some of his magic into her. After the first round, Edelgard told them that he had to go deeper to reach the demon lord. She suggested creating a hole in Rem, but since that would have led to her losing the 2 pints of blood she had in her body, Edelgard pointed out a second hole inches above her petted rice cakes that could do the job. Takuma was starting to wonder if the writers of his life story needed to get arrested, but with no other option available, he uncovered the hole and went to work. Rem's happy noises made it hard to focus, but he managed to keep his mind in control. He eventually got deep enough to find Krebskalm's soul. After finding it, Diablo blasted inside her, pouring every ounce of pent-up magic he had to fill up the demon lord's soul. When he finished, the entire altar lit up with an energy blast as Krebskalm's soul came out of Rem's body. An orb of pure energy then fell to the altar and covered them in a dark fog. The next moment, somebody's daughter in a Halloween costume stood on the edge, claiming to be the demon lord. When Takuma told her to go find her mummy, she proved herself by almost blowing up the tower with her power. In a weird turn of events, she forgot how to use her power and started asking them why she was supposed to be a world ender in the first place. Seeing that the time in Rem's womb had given her amnesia, they somehow convinced her to stop hating humanity, and she agreed. Shara then gave her biscuits to cure her hunger, and she decided to dedicate herself to eating all the biscuits on the planet. While they all laughed at how innocent she looked, Alicia seemed to be unable to understand what the hell was going on. With the demon lord becoming a couch potato, they decided to take her back to town, and were on their way there when a mutant eagle with an abnormal goatee showed up. Ulrich was an old fallen who had served several demon lords over the centuries, and was smart enough to know that something was wrong when he saw the biscuit warrior who was meant to be their greatest commander. He immediately tried to take her out and got blocked by a Delgard. After he tossed her at least 100 feet away, he smashed her into the ground before picking her up to squash her tiny head for being incompetent. He then sensed an attack and dodged Takuma's attempt to take him out. Takuma then used a second skill to roast him midair, but he survived it and charged at him with full speed. The mind skill from earlier also couldn't stop him, but the reflection ability of the demon ring ended up being what stopped him in his feathery tracks. After Takuma used a blast skill to stop his final attempt to get Krebskalm, he told Takuma that he would be back and dipped. On the rest of the way back, they decided to change Krebskalm's name to Clem for safety reasons. After getting back to the inn, Takuma was worn out from the excessive magic use, and Shara decided to use the fact that Rem was staying with Alicia to get some alone time with him. When Clem saw what she was doing and got curious, Shara asked her to join in so they could both help Takuma get his energy back. As their happy noises slowly increased in intensity, Takuma also reached the divine point of explosion and passed out with them shortly after. Their happy noises had woken up Alicia, who then revealed that her true wish was for Clem to exterminate all of humanity because she had daddy issues. Meanwhile, inside a chapel, Sadler had finally gotten free of the stone curse and promised to have his vengeance on Takuma. The next day, the girls were having a sing-along on their way to a cafe, and Alicia was slowly losing her grip on sanity. When they got to the cafe, Takuma sat at a different table with Celestine, talking about the latest addition to his harem. Celestine ended up being cool with the idea that the demon lord was running around town eating biscuits, and also didn't care that Takuma was clapping her. On the way back, Takuma and Shara suddenly noticed that Rem, Clem, and Alicia had vanished. Alicia had taken them through an alley to a hidden location, where she told them she was planning on returning the rest of Clem's memories, so she could do her job and take out the human race. When Clem threatened to make her crisper than deep-fried wings, she begged her to make it as hot as possible, which made Rem realize that she was the one who caused what happened with Gallant. Sadler then suddenly showed up, and Alicia told him that Rem was a demon lord worshipper who was trying to kidnap innocent little Clem. To defend herself from the false prophet, she immediately summoned Azulau, the three-horned bull. Sadler commanded his minions to become human shields for him and finished off the bull while they held it back. Rem then got choked out and put into a wagon with Clem, who gave her a biscuit to make her feel better about being smacked around. On the way to wherever they were being taken, Clem asked her why she had helped her during Ulrich's attack on her life. Rem explained that since she was technically her mother, she couldn't bring herself to hate her like she should. She had also realized that Clem was being treated like a ticking time bomb simply because she came into the world with an insane level of power. After swallowing the rest of her biscuits, Clem reminded her that she could actually roast the entire paladin squad and free them, but Rem made her promise to keep eating biscuits like a good little girl. When they eventually got to the chapel from last night, the paladins took Rem into what turned out to be a chapel of torture that Sadler used to purify demon lord worshippers before sending them to heaven. Rem realized that he was simply a blood-hungry psycho and asked Alicia why she was comfortable siding with him. When she started talking about all the times they shared together, Alicia got tired of the whining and left Sadler to do what he does best. By dark, Takuma was getting frustrated looking for the girls, and with no other option left, he went into the guild, where Emil was cooking up some fake hero story to tell the rest of the adventurers. Realizing that he would lose aura points by asking for help, he froze up. Thankfully, a young boy showed up and told them he had seen the paladins taking the girls to the chapel. While Takuma raced to the chapel, Lord Galford was on the city walls, looking at an army of fallen led by Edelgard approaching the city. He immediately sent word to Celestine, who started reinforcing the barrier to protect the city. Back at the chapel, Rem was held down by the paladins while Sadler nearly cut off her ear before stabbing her with his sword. Clem had started to get pissed off at that point, and when she tried to get him to stop, he swung his blade at her. The slash tore off her robe, revealing her true nature, so Sadler and his boys turned to face her. Rem jumped in and ended up taking a deep cut to the back as she pushed Clem out of the way. As she fell to the floor, bleeding out, Sadler put the rest of the swords he could find in her back. Seeing this, Clem went berserk and completed her resurrection by transforming into a giant 5,000 Sikh demon lord. Sadler thought he still stood a chance and got his eyes bloodied before Clem burned him into nothingness. Takuma had finally made it to the chapel by then, and Shara also showed up after using her turkey shot to find Rem. Takuma gave her all his healing potions to save Rem, while he went to stop Clem from destroying all of humanity. Alicia had gotten to the fallen army and luckily kept her head intact when Edelgard told Ulrich that she was a part of their success. Meanwhile, on the city walls, Sylvie went to see Galford and told him to leave the metal monstrosity in the city to Takuma, who was struggling to communicate with Clem. After dodging some of Clem's punches that instantly turned the ground to lava, Takuma realized that he had to set up his greatest attack to take her down while containing the intensity of their battle. But with Clem seconds away from pulverizing him, he had to do it while running around the cemetery dodging her attacks. After making it to the destroyed chapel, Shira found Rem, and after pouring all the potions down her throat, she came back from the other side. But with the potions being the only ones left, Diablo was now actually fighting for his life, and it wasn't looking good as Clem had switched to throwing the graves of Sadler's victims at him. After Emil showed up and saved the girls from one of the graves, he took them out of the chapel and gave Takuma the heads up to use his attack. His attack engulfed Clem in a combination of elemental tornadoes that burned a crater into the ground and left Clem looking like a baked mutant roach. She still stood up after taking his deadliest hit, but by then, Rem was back on her feet with Shira's help and made her return to her less terrifying form. After Clem returned to normal, Ulrich told Edelgard that she was going to have to become a sandbag for the entire army as punishment for wasting their time. By then, the group had reunited, and Sylvia immediately addressed the elephant in the room. They couldn't let the demon lord keep wandering around, snacking on biscuits, so they decided to officially add her to Takuma's harem. After convincing her of the benefits of being a slave to the self-proclaimed demon lord, she agreed. Takuma sealed the deal with a kiss. Back at the inn, the girls got changed and joined the exhausted demon lord in bed as he was too tired for the usual workout. Before they could get some shut-eye, Alicia came in and took Shira hostage with a knife to her throat. She then took them to another room where Edelgard was slowly drifting to the great beyond after the fallen army took their frustrations out on her. Clem brought her back to the other side and told her to join them for a biscuit party instead of getting bruised up by Ulrich every time she failed to do his job for him. Unable to forgive herself for her betrayal, Alicia tried to unalive herself. She told them about her daddy issues and how it created her villain origin story that drove her to try and end her own race. Takuma stopped her and gave a speech about starting over on her own terms, which struck a chord with him since he had been similarly isolated until his summoning. After his speech, he nearly collapsed from exhaustion, so the girls decided to all help him get his energy back with their plots. Unable to process the various plots before his eyes, Takuma's dopamine receptors fried, causing him to pass out. The next day, Alicia set off to find the good side of humanity, while Takuma continued to manage his harem. Outro. With Takuma and his girls out scouting for a new recruit for the harem, let's hope they find someone that isn't connected to the end of the world. That is it for this video. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.